Okay, let's see if everything is working correctly. I've only been doing this for a few months. Very professional. Okay, should be live now. Excellent. Now I'll just check on the correct places and yep, that looks to be about right. Good stuff. Now I'll just make a quick social media post. Right. Let's go. Nice to see you here. Okay, great. We are good to go. I shall just make a quick "we're live" post on the old social media, because a smart person would do this beforehand, but I'm not smart. Right. There we go. Done. Okay. Hello everyone to another stream. 2 in 1 month, which is interesting. And yeah, all good to go. Excellent. So, got all my stuff sorted. How's everyone been since the last time? Hopefully should be good. Now, a common complaint that I had for all these streams is talking for an hour makes me incredibly dry. So, I've got myself armed with a cup of tea, with a glass of water and some Tic Tacs. So if you see me necking those throughout the course of the thing, I'm not ill, I'm not chugging pills, I'm just keeping my throat somewhat stable. Other brands of capsule-based confectionaries are available, I'm sure. Right, let's get to this. Yes, I know I'm so quiet. There's only so much I can do with this audio, so you're going to have to up your volume, I'm afraid. Unless I can change it, actually. I don't know, am I that quiet? Maybe I should be getting louder. It always seems quiet on my end, but I've got the volume up to max. Have I got the volume up to max? Yeah, I do. That's definitely something I'll have to fix for next one. I mean, it's probably just because I'm probably proximity to my mic. I mean, it is. Yeah, it's not the inbuilt one. Yeah. But anyway. Yeah, I'm glad you've been doing good. And basically, if you're not watching anything else, you might have to up that volume, I'm afraid. I should say I'm quite pleased with the channel so far. I'm on 29 subscribers, which means I'm getting. Oh, good. Which means that I'm encroaching ever closer to the big 50, where I can reveal the big 50th subscriber special, which is me spending the whole thing reading with. Oh, you're in VC with folks, are you? Bless you. Made it. Hello, Sonny. Yeah, so when we eventually get to the 50, I'm going to be reading through and doing a dramatic reading of that atrocious Doctor Who fan script that I did for the 11 Doctors. And provided we can get more folks from the Doctor Who community, that will be fun because it's really bad. Really bad. And I haven't touched it yet, and I've got no intention of touching it till when that actually happens. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So now that people are in, we can kick off. So I thought I'd start off with a bit of a progress update with book 3. It's sort of not stalled, I would say, but it's definitely been a bit slow. It's definitely been a bit slower, I would say, than other chapters. Don't know why, but yeah, chapter 6 is now done. So I'm probably going to start chapter 7 tomorrow, maybe. Depends what kind of day I've had at work. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more of that done because it's progressing. It's progressing at a decent rate, which is good because it's one of the reasons why I thought I can never be represented, because if they want a deadline, I'm not going to stick to it. I do not work well under deadlines, so if you have it written, then it will be good. We shall see. So yeah, I'm happy with how that's going, and plot-wise, it's progressing slowly along. No rushing it. So still got the 2022 release date. It will be at some point in those 12 months. Probably, I'd hazard a guess at saying mid to late 22. I'd say probably aiming for late. But if it comes out earlier, then fantastic. But I just won't rush it. Basically, current progress late 22 is looking likely. So I've got a few things. I'm hoping to finish up Conundrum this weekend. I've got 3 chapters left to do. Looking forward to that. Now, anyone who knows Jacob's Doctor Who novel adaptations, I think most of the people in the chat are in them, which is great. And Sunny is a fellow Whovian, so, and author, so she'll appreciate the job that's being done. But yeah, Deceit and Lucifer Rising coming up along with Evolution. Evolution being the next one. Totally not plugging them because most of us are in it. And yeah, looking forward to those coming out. Sometimes you run into blocks, it's just a thing that happens from time to time. Yeah, motivational blocks for me more than anything else. But yeah, really happy to hear that Conundrum's coming along, especially with your hectic schedule. Okay, so I thought I have 2 big conversational pieces that I found, because I kept mentioning in previous ones, when I wasn't actually meant to be doing them, that I found a terrific video online, and I actually have got the video down this time, and it's by a YouTuber called Thomas Flight, who I only subscribed to today, actually, after seeing some more of the videos, but some really in-depth stuff, and 2 videos of him I thought were particularly interesting to bring up, mainly because they're to relate with films, but I think what's interesting is you can often pair what works with Trumpet Blair, the gay one has arrived. Join the club, we're all rainbows here. Or most of us anyway. I always thought it was interesting looking at how people talk about film and then prose. Now obviously 2 different formats, but while they are inherently different in their presentation, and you can do more with books, I find that a lot of things that either a lot of problems or a lot of pros and cons that you have with film can actually translate to book when it comes to the stuff within, not the prose itself, but within the prose, like the characters and the plot and whatnot. And 2 things that the first video of his that I found that I mentioned previously was a big video essay about perspective using the miniseries Chernobyl. And I've got some notes on that I'll go through and sort of present through the lens of writing, because it is a terrific video. And you can really sort of do interesting things with that I'll get to. And I've touched on it briefly before, but this is the ending. And the thing that I just finished watching and made note of, which is something I touched on before, but I thought, oh, okay, this is a good time to like really go into depth with it, was Talk of Exposition. And in Thomas Flight's case, it was through Tenet, and the video is Nolan has an exposition problem, because if Christopher Nolan can screw up, then we all can. But yeah, we'll get to that. But first, I have to thank Twitter user Charlotte Newings, aka at Lottie Newings, because she did a post that I asked and have permission to quote from, and it was talking about writing takes, to use the internet term, your hot takes, if you will. And I found two from her particular thread that amused me and also bemused me at the same time. And I thought I'd just start with them just to ease it off, because I've got some things to say about this first one. The particularly bad take is, if you don't enjoy writing it, nobody will enjoy reading it. Now, all the writers in the chat, I want to pose a question to you. Have any of you ever started writing something and then midway through thought, oh, this is awful, this is crap, I don't like it, this isn't going to go well. I would wager most of us have. I certainly have. It took me even after actually getting my books out there and like some reviews coming in that I actually could confidently say to myself, okay, I haven't written anything too bad. And now, while I can recognise a lot of the flaws of book one and have certainly learnt from them, I'm still not going to say that, like, well, I'd definitely not go to the stage where it's like, oh, it's perfect, it's flawless. No. I'm also not going to be hung up on the fact that, like, previously I did wonder if it was any good or not. Now I've sort of found a good happy medium between that and especially with book two as well. The second I don't like it, scrap. Valid. I mean, in your case, I can, as I've said in DMs, music and prose are very similar in that it takes a lot of craft and a lot of time and effort. If you're doing your own lyrics, then, there's a lot of creativity that goes into that, and it's kind of like you are very self-conscious about that and very self-critical. So if you do end up with something that you don't like, your immediate reaction is, right, burn it. But I've tried to stay away from that personally because I'm often left with like, okay, well, if it's crap, why is it crap? And what can you do to improve it? Alternatively, if you just can't be asked and you think the idea is just unsalvageable, then fair enough. I've definitely had a few cases of them. Thankfully, nothing that was ever considered serious. But the whole thing of if you don't enjoy it, no one will enjoy reading it kind of implies that you need to like constantly feel great about this and it'll get the enjoyment from the others. Because like, I don't think that it's not. It's if you were doing a stand-up gig and you had a miserable day and you were showing that you were having a miserable day, that's not going to be an enjoyable experience because it's very much case dependent. But if it's something like written prose, I don't really think that like an audience would particularly notice if you weren't feeling particularly confident about your story. So I really I second that as being a bad take, and support its inclusion on that list. And the second one I support is I write for the love of the craft. I don't care if anyone reads it. Now, noble sentiment, but the love of the craft. God, you sound pretentious. So when it comes to writing, if you think that it is a craft, then you are totally within your right to think so. But if you go at it through the lens of, oh, it's like a skill like any other, like it's like being a carpenter or being a landscape artist or whatever, then it's not. It's a creative endeavor. There's to imply that there is like some particular craft to it is definitely limiting it, I think, because when you're writing, you've got complete range for it to be whatever you want it to be. It's not like you are bound to any set of rules or anything. So that I think is quite a limited thing. But then of course, if it's like I don't care if anyone reads it, then fair enough. If you just want to write for the sake of writing and to boast that you have written a book and put it out there, then that is more than fair. But I think if you're going into it with the idea of like, oh well, this is me exploring the craft, then I don't know. As Sonny said, write because I want to tell a story. I do want other people to read it and enjoy it, but I don't write for profit. See, I think that's what they're trying to go for. I think that's the core idea that they want to convey, but as is often the case with some authors, it's lost under a sea of pretentiousness. And generally I can't really abide pretentiousness. I just need to say 3 words to the resident Doctor Who's about pretentiousness, Simon Boucher-Jones. Sip, to know that pretentiousness can really can really inflate an ego, especially if you think that you are writing the next big thing. And if it turns out not to be the case, then if you can't take criticism well, then maybe it's time to either find a better line of work or mature until you feel the need to Right again. That's my opinion anyway. Now there might have been more responses to that, but those were the two that I saw immediately. That I swear we slagged off Simon Butcher Jones more than once on this, and I feel like it's a character assassination. But you know what? If you're gonna have that if you're gonna have that response to someone writing a review, then it's on you to have the consequences. Really, if you're gonna lash out and be childish. Because the important thing anyone who's in the arts has to consider is no one's gonna love your book 100%. No one's gonna love your music 100%. You know, there will always be people that either won't like it, it's not really their thing, or they thought they were gonna like it, read it, and it was either a bit underwhelming, not what they expected, didn't grip them the right way, and then there'll be those people that will criticise it just for the sake of bad criticism, but you don't pay attention to those. You know, you pay attention to the people that have something useful to say. Do you think that writing something just because you want to tell an interesting story would be a good reason, or do you think that that's too simple? No, I'd certainly think that if you've got any reason to write a story, then do it. If it's for profit, then, you know, you probably would need to look into... If you're going to write for profit, I would say look for places that will obviously offer it. You know, whether it would be writing for... zines, if that's a particular thing, or like finding short story collections, or even just like, you know, going down the route of journalism first of all, because at the end of the day, writing is writing, even if it's non-fiction. Made it look like I chugged pills then. Or for all those talks with fans, just downing memory pills. But no, that is basically my idea. Yeah, like, I've been doing this for 3 years, and, you know, I'm not going to dwell on this, but I've made a decent return financially. I've been able to treat myself with some money, but it's not going to be anything that will sustain me. Now, whether you are lucky enough to get a book deal or get an agent and take it from there, which is something that may be in the future for me, I don't know. But if that is something you want to do, then yes, maybe you will be able to get more financially incentivized through it. But I mean, Amazon released a thing that was very bad. I think I mentioned this before, but Amazon released a thing that was very badly written that upset a lot of people, because it said, oh, if you're self-publishing through Amazon, then only like 1% or whatever it was actually make it big. And it's like, well, you say that, but what you mean by make it big is people who can do this for a living, that have enough book sales that they can be financially dependent on. And those people will probably have either been influencers or someone that has enough clout previously that they could sell loads of stuff by self-publishing. Pardon me. Being an author may not be the best job for profits, to be honest, unless you have made it big. Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's if you are working anyway, then expect, like, good book profits to be able to be like nice bit of pocket money / allowance on the side. And if you want to maximize sales, then there are ways to do that, but I've barely even touched those, so I'm not the right kind of person to talk about that too. So yeah, that's what I'd say to that. Anyway, before we get to off topic, I'm going to address the 2 videos because I found them very interesting. So, right, where's the button? That's the button. Cool. So, all these points are from Thomas Flight's Chernobyl, a masterclass in perspective, and Tennant Nolan has an exposition problem. These are now going to be sort of worked in through what I took from it, which is how a writer would tackle these problems. So, the first one, Chernobyl, masterclass in perspective. Now, I didn't really consider perspective much throughout writing books 1 and 2, because I knew that it was mostly going to be through the... So for book 1, the perspective is predominantly through Gabby's eyes, a bit of Trem's vibes, a bit of her grandfather's vibes. Vibes! Bloody hell. Eyes, perspective. They're not vibing. I think Brandon Sanders said you probably need to write 4 more books a year to make a living off of writing books, plus even if you publish, that may not make it. Yeah, and at the rate I'm going, a book a year is about what I can basically push out. So, I thought I'll make use of this because come book 3, it's going to be a first because book 3's climax will involve a big action sequence, and throughout that action sequence, you'll see the characters that you've either been introduced to in book 3 or that you've seen from books 1 and 2. And instead of like doing a carte blanche description of the battle, it's like going into like perspectives of each of the characters. So with that in mind, the sort of big takeaway and the sort of too long didn't read for the talk and perspective is use it for emotion and drama. First of all, like if you really want to give your reader a sense of something within this, like say action scene, then seeing it through a very narrow perspective of one or two characters is the best way to go about it if you want to be really effective in the sense of making it character driven. So for instance, in Chernobyl there's a really good episode, I think it's episode 3 or 4, and in that they use one person's perspective. Through one person you can then create a subjective perspective, by which I mean you can basically tell, if you're really clever about it, you could basically sum up the experience of hundreds or thousands just by focusing on one person. Now who you choose to focus on is the key. So in Chernobyl's case, in this one, they just introduced a character out of the blue. I can't remember his name. He was played by Barry Keoghan, who's going to be in Marvel's in Eternals. And in that, I don't even think he's got any lines. But all he's doing is following two soldiers around, and they're shooting dogs to prevent the radiation from spreading. Now, random character, never seen him before, probably won't see him much after this, but by introducing him, you've now created a bigger sense of what's going on. Like this is after it's all been evacuated, so you're now seeing previously occupied places, pure ghost town with just a few wild dogs going around that they're just killing, popping off, and through that you get like a very narrow, very tight perspective of what this place has now become. It's gone from being a thriving city to a wilderness. Not only that, but you're now establishing a new status quo, because through this, now you know that this guy's he has to kill animals, he has to kill defenseless animals, because if he doesn't, that could then contribute to a nuclear fallout that will spread to other countries. Now, through introducing a character and using him in this way, you've now established what a new status quo is. You've now established what the situation is in what was a major setting. It's now Ghost Town. So you can see that introducing this character with that in mind is interesting. Now, if you do that with a character that you've already established, then that's great because, you know, they've got a sense of what the previous status quo is. So that's very interesting. Plus, you can empathise with individuals. You can't empathise with crowds of thousands. So already you're creating quite a relatable thing for a reader, because especially if it's like in my case, if it's fantasy, if it's new, and we'll get to this with the expedition, but if you've created this fantasy world that isn't like our own, then it's going to be harder for a reader to associate with or to find something to relate to. I've worked with music and song, and I recently finished one for over a year and just haven't finished it. Congratulations! I'm looking forward to hearing that as well. So you owe me a listening party. So yeah, one person's experience can be mirrored by thousands. That's the big takeaway. Yeah, and as I said, perspective can often like be really good at setting the tone for something as well. As we said, from thriving city to ghost town, and then what really dictates this, especially if it's for like new characters and new settings, is how the character that you're following reacts to this. And another thing that will tie into the next point is by having a POV character like this, exposition can now feel more natural. And again, pin in that because we'll come back to that, but exposition through characters is probably like a really like, it's a really natural thing to do if you can do it right. Because as I'm so often fond of saying, the last thing people want to read when they're going through, like, a book, whether it be thin or dense, is just to be like pages upon pages upon pages of like, what's this? Where'd they come from? You know, some books can do it right. Pardon me. Some movies can do it right. A lot also can't, and that's what it's just like, getting a balance. Because as I've said, I'm not one for pages upon pages of like historical text as exposition. It's more like, oh, what's this? Oh, well, it's that, and then the character explains it in small, simple ways, as opposed to just walls of text. Especially if you want to create a bit of an air of mystery, if you've got an element of unreliable narrator, if the main characters aren't quite sure what they're describing is, which is what I did with book one, when Trem's explaining stuff about Manzazu culture. She's relatively young and she's not been exposed to it, so everything that she's regurgitating is just what she's heard. And then in books 2 and 3 onwards, you get to see whether the stuff that was discussed was actually true or if it was false. What else did I have? Yeah, basically, the character can't see what's happening clearly, nor will we. So if it's something like a big disaster's gone on, then that's great. You've got a sense of confusion. The characters are as confused as the reader. They're very much along with the ride. That's if you want to do a first-person perspective. Because, like, for example, if you said the third-person perspective would be, well, to use Chernobyl again, the roof of the reactor exploded, everyone panicked. Or like, if it was a first-person perspective, Comrade so-and-so felt a shuddering. Then the lights went out, everyone's eardrums started ringing. There was a sense of confusion. You know, it's, what do you feel as a writer is more impactful? Do you want to say, this happened and this happened, or this character felt this because this also happened, but they aren't quite sure why? That's the it's up to you. It's always up to the writer, I'd say. It's whatever suits your scene and style the best. Like, if you are writing this as the, like, to use Doctor Who again because it's the topless thing that came off my head, if you use something like Lawrence Miles's Adventure in Henrietta Street or Faction Paradox's Book of War, which are more treated as less like conventional stories and more, let's tell this as if it was a history book, then obviously you want a third person perspective, or you could do like accounts from someone if that's the kind of story you want. But if you're telling a conventional plot, then, you know, it's up to you to think whether telling something through the perspective of a character is more like, is it going to be better for the characters, their characterization and how they are presented on the page, or do you just want to tell the story as it happens from like a bird's eye perspective? What's my thoughts on epilogues? Jacob can vouch with me that book one's epilogue is way too overlong and kind of pointless, but the epilogue for book two is slightly better. Yeah, I think for the most part they're okay. It depends on what you want to do with them. If you want to set up future stuff, then that's quite good, but just make sure that you actually go through with it, because I think we've all seen movies where they set up for a sequel that never happens. The first ones to come to my head are stuff like M. Night Shyamalan's Avatar and stuff like that. Or epilogues are like there to do like a little bit of payoff to stuff that you wouldn't have like shown within the book, or to just like have a nice little scene at the end, something rewarding for the reader. So very much a case by case basis, but I would say that epilogues on the whole conceptually are fine, just like prologues. It's like a prologue will get you into the story gradually, or like set the scene quite nicely, or like an epilogue will like give you a nice little bit at the end. So yeah, I've got no problem with them. I'm feeling I need an epilogue for book one. See, the question is like, what would you put in the epilogue that would justify having an epilogue? Like, if you want to put something in there to set up for book 2, then that's fine, because it means that more people are likely to buy book 2, incentive. Or do you have something in there to be, like, basically a bonus scene, like an additional scene, just to have at the end, whether it would be something to explain something within the book, or to set something up, or to just have something else just existing there. So it's purely, what can you find that would justify putting it in there, as opposed to just like, well, I need a scene at the end. I don't think you necessarily do. It just depends on, you know, what you think would be useful. So it's basically, if you've got the right idea, go for it, I'd say. I'm doing well with I'm doing well with hydration, so that's good. I haven't tried out much yet. I think generally, if you feel the need to put something in your book, you kind of have to step back and think, okay, well, why do I feel like I need to put it in there? You know, what is putting an epilogue in there going to... I'll tell you later because of spoilers. Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that I'd say is a good idea of it. Mm. Jacob brings up a good point. Another really good way to make an epilogue work is to have it mirror the prologue. Whenever Robert Jordan had an epilogue in The Wheel of Time, it was that. Yeah, like there you've got your natural bookends. And if it's set up for book 2, if you have anything in the prologue that could thematically link it, then by all means, that's just win-win. Now, going back to the... Oh no, there was one more thing. There's one more thing that is there to consider for perspective that I thought was a good note. And this isn't tied into the video, but basically in the video it says, an explosion, a disaster, or a monster by itself is not scary, but it becomes scary when it is relative to the characters we sympathise with. Then it becomes scary. So I immediately thought of how Gareth Edwards directed Godzilla, which I haven't seen much of, but I've seen clips, Godzilla and Star Wars Rogue One. Now, in those cases, you've got, like, Godzilla towering over the city. You know, a kaiju knocking over skyscrapers isn't inherently scary. It's spectacle, but isn't scary. But it becomes scary when you've created sympathetic characters that you've come to know for, say, a quarter of the movie or half the movie. You then put them in a situation of peril with that whopping great kaiju knocking down a city. That's now become the most terrifying thing in the world, because you've seen what the stakes it creates is. And in Star Wars, Rogue One, you know, we've spent so long with these characters that, like, say, the Battle of Scarif, for example, we see probably the most intimidating look that the AT-ATs ever have, with these massive great feet that are like nearly crushing rebel soldiers, and then the characters that we see are like fighting them and they look like the giant monstrosities. That's now cool. But if you look at like Star Wars Episode 5, you know, there is still an element of peril with them, but not as much. You know, it's spectacle over impact, in my opinion anyway. Saying that Star Wars Episode 5 has problems on the internet will get me crucified, so I'm expected to lose all these followers and getting cancelled on the internet. What can you do? Yeah, good point. I like epilogues because they can use to tie up loose ends and hint at what could be more, but not make it be apparent. Yeah, exactly. Now, since we have shockingly reached the halfway point, God, this has flown by, I will tackle the next point. Now I just need to get my notifications to bugger off. Okay, so the next thing is now I've always made my opinion on expository dialogue to be quite well known, because I think you want to create a fleshed out world, but again, as I've said before, you don't want to bore people with like constant text if you can, like, if you haven't got a good balance, basically. Yeah, all Star Wars movies have flaws. Try telling the internet that. That's like a little red sniper dots that's formed on my forehead. 24-hour stream, let's go. My voice gets shot at 1 hour. I'll be a 24-hour stream of me talking will just be me going. You'll be stuck with me typing. So don't wish that upon yourself, let alone me. So yeah, this is from the video Tenet. Nolan has an exposition problem, and I recommend both these and this particular channel because they are very insightful. So, already this is kind of a moot point because movies have one thing that books don't have, which is when you are in a position where you have to explain a lot of things, when it comes to explaining complexity, you could do it with visuals. In a book, you can't. So a good reach around would be sort of stuff like, I know it sounds cheap, but stuff like Star Trek did it a lot, where it's like, we're going to explain what we're going to do in the technobabble sense, and then we're going to liken it in a way that the average person can understand. But there are ways that you can get around basically like big blocks of exposition, and it is basically context, and context is very important. So if you're exploring really complex ideas, like if we're talking about like bending the space-time continuum and stuff like that, it would make sense for your characters to turn around and go, well, what does that mean? And then the expert character goes, okay, well, it works like this. Because in the context of it, it makes sense to want to ask that. So I've written Doctor Who as an example. Robots of Death. There's the scene where Tom Baker is explaining to Louise Jameson, aka the Fourth Doctor and Leela, how the TARDIS works. And he gives this thing about two boxes and perspective and whatnot. I've spilt the bad takes. Were you not there? But yeah, that makes sense in that context because it's like, okay, well, explain to me how a police box can be bigger on the inside than the out. Okay, well, this is how. And they did it in the Peter Cushing movies too, twice in fact. One of which by a little girl, so makes Ian in that movie sound even more scathed. But that makes sense because contextually, there's no way that like you wouldn't be able to have it so that someone would say, well, how does this work? It works like this. Unless you cut away from that and then explain it in larger concepts. So it's kind of meaningless to like... It's like kind of, meaningless to try it too many other ways. It makes sense then. And I think people will generally be forgiven because when it comes to complexities, I think if you're going into these kind of things like wanting to know about how these concepts work, then you will accept that because it's basically... Exposition is fourth wall breaking, in a sense. And that's good because it's like, okay, well, I'm being told this. Just in the same way that this character is, because so often than not, main characters are often surrogates for the reader anyway. And then And then another thing, that if you need to be like blatant and drawn out with your exposition, one thing that really helps that I've seen is do something interesting with it. Having an interesting setting, have something happen during it, so like it breaks it up. I know it's easier to do on a visual medium, but if you're feeling particularly adventurous with your prose, then you can by all means like get quite jiggy with it when it comes to filling the stuff with interesting things. This is an excuse to like break up these chunks of explaining things. Pause for refreshment. And of course the reason why I bring all this up is because I think a lot of complaints regarding any kind of story that requires explanation of concepts, whether they be big concepts, setting up fantasy, setting up sci-fi concepts, all this stuff, is you don't want to get too bogged down in this stuff and you don't want to swamp someone with it. So it's all about finding the right balance in how you choose to do it, in my opinion anyway. What else was there? And going back to how these characters spew off this exposition. A big thing that the video noted that I had sort of thought about, but I didn't really sort of think about it in this particular way, was it has to be motivated, and that's why context is really important. Because say, I'm just using Sonny's Edgewater as an example. Say if someone turns around and goes, oh, what is Edgewater? Then a character will say, oh, it's this, it's, Magic's Call, etc. But then if someone goes, oh, hey, that thing is, and then it's less motivated by character thing, because if exposition's breaking the fourth wall, then that is literally them almost turning to camera to address you to say, oi, that thing. Which is why that's because the video gives examples of good and bad exposition. That's generally regarded as bad exposition because they have broken character or broken the flow of that particular scene. And it's just right, halt, we got to explain what this is to the stupid people at home. This is what it is, as opposed to within the scene it naturally progressing into a situation where they will need to explain what's going on, or explain what something is, or explain a character's backstory, stuff like that. So it feels natural. Because as a reader, or a viewer, I think it can be quite easy to be pulled out of it if something's being explained to you and then you're like, hold on, are you talking to them or us? Because I'm pretty sure we've all seen moments in a movie or a TV show or read in a book where it's just okay, but why are you explaining it to us like that? I get it, but why like that? It's a bit lazy. So that's always one thing to keep in mind, I reckon. It's you're either explaining it in a non-personal way to say this is this, this is that, or you've got the characters doing it. You don't really want the two to blur. And another thing that would be useful with prose that the video said is a bit of a flaw of movies is, say if you've got the inexplainable things, so 5-dimensional space in Interstellar, reverse causality in Tenet. Those things in a medium such as film, where you aren't privy to the characters' inner thoughts and stuff like that, has to be explained in a visual sense. And that isn't always the easiest thing to do. And often, as a viewer watching that, you think, okay, but I don't really know. I know what it looks like. Cars flipping when you're going past, stuff like that. I get that. I get that visually. But what else is going on other than visuals? I've read 2 books in my life and both are Twilight books, so quality writing I haven't fully experienced. We'll see what you think when you read my books. I'm no Stephanie Meyer though, but that might be a good thing, that might be a bad thing, we don't know. But so when it comes to these things on film, sure you can see them visually, and seeing these concepts work visually is good, it explains it. But another thing that is a benefit of books that you can't get as well in the movies without making it sound like David Lynch's Dune with the constant monologues is what it feels like. So okay, well we know what this dreamscape looks like because we're flipping upside down and towers are coming like that, and that's fair enough. An audience can see that, but then you can also write that into a book. But what does it actually feel like? Because going back to perspective, if you are taking quite a first-person perspective on this, then, or just going into the characters' perspectives while also explaining that a bloody skyscraper is just folded, then you are creating a much more relatable experience, because when you sort of divulge what the character is feeling, that's more relatable. But I don't think many people, when watching Interstellar, when watching Inception, would really get a feel for what the characters are feeling. Because I'd look at that thing and immediately think, my God, I'm about to hurl out my ears because of my motion sickness. You know, not exactly textbook stuff, but so that's a pro to pros, if you will. Yeah, and another thing that I never really considered, but then watching the video and then thinking about it, I thought, ooh, that's interesting, was, and this is always good for character work as well, is you can feel and experience something. Like whether it be a movie, watching a movie, or reading about it in a book, you can experience what is going on. Like time is broken, reality is warping, blah 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 blah. I can understand that. I can experience the linear progression of the events, but trying to understand the concept and like try to rationalize what that means, what it feels like, are two different things. And I found that, and that's something I never really considered until now, because when you're reading something and the stuff's happening, then you know you kind of take it as read, unless it's badly written, in which case you're just confused. But then it's just like, okay, that stuff's happening, but why is it happening? And then through that exposition, you get the whys as well as the hows. And yeah, I hadn't considered that, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, because if I need to explore more complex thoughts going forward, then the best way to do all that stuff, if you don't want to get bogged down in explaining how it happens, is explaining how it affects the characters. I don't know how to write in POV, even in songs I have to write from the character's perspective. Yeah, so if you ever went on to write any prose, then it feels like your strengths would be seeing whatever the story was going through on a character perspective rather than a larger world view. By which I mean, like, instead of like saying, oh, you know, so-and-so dredged over a canyon and into an oasis or whatever, then like, you know, you get into the character's brains and then you get like, oh, the sense of relief they felt when that happened, and you know, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's always good to know what your strengths are. Now, one thing, and I think we can all find examples of this if we look, is when we see something happen and we know where it is, and then the exposition kicks in to just be like, oh, that's that thing. It's like, yes, we know, we've seen it. Why are you explaining it again? Because, again, finding balance is difficult, and with this kind of stuff, with exposition, with explaining concepts, you really have to be careful not to come off like you're treating your audience as an idiot. Which is difficult if you have a lot of complex stuff that you want to get through. So it's difficult because you like have to have confidence in your writing enough to be able to feel like you've explained it well enough without having to like double up on the explanation, being like, okay, well, that's happened. Did you get it? Did you not? Well, this is why. As opposed to just like letting it happen. Very bad etiquette of me clicking my phone midstream. Everyone can free to bollock me. And then one thing that Tenet did that bloody, and again, no spoilers if you haven't seen my movie, but one thing that bloody got to me, and something that I hope I haven't done but definitely won't be doing in my books, is explaining major character developments and reveals through exposition. Because you know what you've just done? You've just basically said, oh, that character's just done that, or that character is actually that way. And you've not shown it. And that's, like, baffling to me, because, like, if you want to show character development, then you show it. And you show it gradually. You don't just leave it at the very end to just be like, oh, but this character actually did that. Because it's incredibly cheap. In my opinion, anyway. It could be done well, but I wouldn't certainly try it. I think you'd need to be incredibly confident in your own work to be able to like pull off something that is basically an 11th hour out of nowhere reveal if it's not like intricately set up previously. So say say, for example, you have a character that's working for someone. Now, if you didn't reference that they were working with someone at all, and then at the very end say, oh, so and so, oh, he was working with so and so, and it's just like, huh? But if you, throughout the course, say that like this character has like ties with someone else, or he's working for someone, and then at the end reveal it, that's now a payoff rather than an out of nowhere reveal. It's show not tell. Exactly. And we who write in the prose medium have so much less limitations than in the visual medium. We can explore so much. So there's even less excuse to fall into these traps, quite frankly. So it's basically, if you have a major expositional moment with no other evidence, then you've cheapened it. That's the takeaway from there. And like, what I found really interesting about both those what I found really interesting about both of those videos is, even though they are purely on a TV and film medium, because these are both mediums in which we tell stories, there will always be beats that all of the forms of storytelling will follow. Just because the format is different doesn't mean that at the end of the day you aren't telling a story. I don't like Nolan so much, but that's just me. To be honest, I like his Batman movies because they are what they are. You know, they're very good at what they do, but you know, it's going back to what we said about pretentiousness. It's a fine line between having a really like unique vision and like having a lot of confidence with your ideas to going over the edge into like maybe you're trying a bit too hard to be different, if you know what I mean. Like, just tell a story and make a film. Don't rely too much on if you've got a concept that you can run with that is accessible, then great. But I feel like he's a case of, and this is something that I'd suggest to a lot of people, make your story as accessible as possible. Otherwise you'd spend so much of it explaining stuff. You didn't. Well, fair enough. As I say, those movies have got their critics, and they are valid in their criticism. But anyway, not to get too off point. You don't want to spend your entire story explaining things. If you've got big concepts, then make sure that those concepts are explained well and done in a way that they can be easily accessible. So if you've got 5-dimensional space, explain what that means, explain what that feels like, explain how it works, yes, but don't make it inaccessible by just like giving you walls of techno jargon. Make it relatable, make it natural, unless you are just like pausing the story to just be like, oh, you know, 0G bloody nano science thingies work like this, and then spend like half a page dedicated to a textbook style synopsis, which is fair enough if you want to do that. This isn't exactly tailor-made to people who want to do that, like plot textbook explanation, textbook explanation, because there is a place for that. Certainly, it's just not one that I would particularly go for myself. One random fact: my EPs are connected albums, so the songs are telling a grander story. Ooh, I like that. Call me uncultured, but is that something that Pink Floyd did, or have I just like insulted every fan of music by suggesting such a thing? Because I know I've seen a few sort of like conceptual albums that like lasted 20 minutes and tell a grand narrative, stuff like that. But anyway, so where was I? Yeah, so basically like to sum up, and the too long didn't read for this particular one is by all means experiment with it and have fun with it, like I would suggest anyone do when it comes to stories, but yes, I got it right. but be mindful. That's why I think that, like, if you've got a story like that, you are basically reliant on your beta readers, and like getting beta readers from someone who doesn't have remotely the same knowledge on these kind of things as you do. Like, basically getting as many outside influences as you can to look at this, see if it makes sense, see if the concepts in there you can understand, and then progress. Because, like, you can understand stuff and you can explain it well enough, but you have to make sure that you've got the opinion of an average Joe. Because they're the ones that will be, like, buying your books. You know, you don't need to be a nuclear physicist to, like, write a story about, you know, say Chernobyl, the deadliness of radiation, but, you know, if you're going to explore what all this technical stuff means, then you are completely reliant on either making it so that it is easily accessible or explaining the stuff to an extent that the explanations will be easy to understand. Again, Chernobyl did that very well by saying, like, one thing they mentioned a lot when the actual place went up is, oh, what's the radiation reading? Oh, it's at like 3 Rontgen. Okay, it's not great, but it's not terrible. Okay, what does it actually measure? Oh, about 1500. Okay, you know, that makes sense because you've framed like complicated stuff in a easy to understand way. And it also helps, again, in the context that Jared Harris is talking to a board of directors who won't know the technical jargon, so they will need it explaining. Ergo, we in the audience need it explaining. And that's good exposition done right. I mean, that helps because you've got a frame of reference, but still. I would, you know what? I've managed to get through all that and managed to be within time. I'm actually quite happy with that. Yeah, I've been wanting to do this for ages and like give a talk about that because it's something that I never considered. How you do exposition, how you do perspective, and how both can like really change your story. Again, it's completely dependent on what kind of story you want to make, what kind of way you want to present it. But yeah, I hadn't considered this before, and I'm glad I did because while I'm quite happy with the way that my stuff's being, you know, the exhibition's being helmed and how the perspective is done, it's good to know that if I want to change it up in any way, now that I've thought about it, there are ways that can do it while still being accessible and relatively consistent with the stuff that's come before. So, I will open the floor to any further questions. Otherwise, I think... Oh, thank you. If anyone's got any more questions, by all means, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll probably start thinking of rounding off. So I'm not quite... I'll fill time by explaining next month. I'm not quite sure. Let me have a look, actually, because I can never remember how many days are in what. So it'll probably be that the July stream will be, potentially the 31st or the 24th, we shall see. But there will be future updates as to when that will be. So yeah, I don't think I've got anything thematically planned for that. Do you know the Muffin Man? The Muffin Man? The Muffin Man. Yes, I know the Muffin Man who lives on Drury Lane. Well, she's married to the Muffin Man. The Muffin Man? Oh, the Muffin Man! She's married to the Muffin Man. You made me quote Shrek. So I really hope you're proud of yourself. We were having a great time. Shrek got involved. You can tell we're near the end of the thing. What am I going to do with you lot? But I can't complain because you're all fantastic. And you all deal with me talking. I know, I mean, hey, the next voice chat we're in now will talk the hind legs off you, so you will be praying for the release of the end. I should say as well, I think, yes, Sonny, good reaction. I will say as well, I've recommended it to a few people, but, sorry being super quiet in VZ. You have fun, you deserve it. I will say, by the way, I've done this before, but again, everyone who's interested, buy this comic, Monstrous. I don't often plug like big name people, but you will be thankful you did, especially if you're into the kind of well, what do they describe it as? Well, I mean, they describe it as like Art Deco beauty and steampunk horror. That is fair. So described as filled to the brim with awesome. Dark, intense world building. Sort of, yeah. I would say sort of LGBT fantasy horror. And I'm not usually a horror person. Read the entire Shrek 2 movie next stream. Oh, that's tempting. But yeah, if you're in, and I'm not massively into horror either, but if you're into horror, fantasy, LGBT themes, you know, go for this one. Especially since it's quite cheap to get on Amazon for like the big like volumes. I'm not in VC. Well, as I say, there's always the if you ever feel comfortable enough, the opportunity is always there for you if you'd like to. I love the art and it's an influence on Edgewater. It's very quickly becoming an influence for me as well. So yeah, I mean, as far as inspiration goes, it really does not take much for me to get inspired because, like, one of the big new musicals for me that I've been interested in. I say it's new; it's been out for 11 years. Is this, which is not in English, and it is Soldier of Orange. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm obsessed with this. But it's a World War II musical in the Netherlands, and actually really happy news that the Dutch production actually announced that they're opening again in October with all like lockdown regulations, all like sorted. So hopefully that means that we might get a UK version. But like the songs in there, I've been writing to religiously, love it, and because I often find that when I write some music, it helps set a tone. So the tone that's been set on there has been very useful. So yeah, if anyone's in the market for foreign musicals that are massive earworms, then that's a good one to start with. Even if you don't know the language, just do what I do, bop along to it. Right. Just googled it's won so many awards. Wow, all deserved. Right. I think that's a good place to end it. Well, thank you everyone for joining. It's nice for me to just be able to like, actually have a plan for once, as opposed to like stumbling through things. You know what? I think, unless I've had like a massive subscriber boom and I get to 50 by the end of next month, goals. I think next one might be another sort of generic rambling sort of AMA type. And again, one bonus is that we didn't have some idiot come into the chat trying desperately to sound really pretentiously homophobic and failing. So, you know, good on us. Screw him. So, great start that we avoided all that. Because if you're gonna try and be homophobic, what's all this nonsense he was trying to pull? Idiots. Can't live with them, can't live without them. You gotta have some balance in the world. While all us smart people rule. Anyway. Yeah. My throat's starting to notice that I've been talking for an hour, so I shall call it there, folks. And again, either the checking the calendar again, 24th or 31st will be the next one. I will keep everyone updated. And yeah, so there's nothing left to say. I think I'll bow out there. Thank you for the great stream. Can't wait for the next one. Thank you, and thank you for stopping by, as everyone else. And yeah, I shall definitely call it there. Okay, folks. Thank you again for watching. And